challenges in and also what are the challenges in transitioning from sort of broad financial services or other industries to a career in fintech? So why don't we start with Rick?
Yeah, so, fintech, although it has been sort of set aside, is really just the digital transformation of the financial services industry. And so, where do the people come from that are going to be successful in those businesses? These are technology software companies, and looking into the traditional software technology space is where the bulk of these folks are going to come from. Obviously, the more financial background they have in the past, the better. But other areas that we've looked successfully are industries where the digital transformation has been happening at a rapid rate. Retail, for example. Obviously, all of these being boosted by COVID and all the lockdowns that have occurred, and streaming and social media. I think they have the elements of creativity and thinking outside of the box thinking, which are very pertinent to being successful in helping to build the right fintech solutions. That's where we look.
Okay, great. And Dan, anything else you would want to add to that in terms of where you might look beyond fintech?
Yeah, I think honestly, fintech is it's such a broad term. We would always focus on what the problem is that particular fintech is looking to solve for example. So you'll find a good example, I suppose, is that anti-money laundering and compliance domain. Individuals may go, I don't know anything about fintech, but somebody who has a deep appreciation of regulation and compliance, actually, if they take a half step back and look at what the product set is of that particular fintech, that's where opportunities can be uncovered. Of course, that does require some domain knowledge, but more broadly, if you're looking at some of the security capabilities, some of the payments capabilities, more broadly, if they're trying to solve for funding type capabilities, that, buy now, pay later, for example, individuals with a very strong finance background who might not know a huge amount about the industry, but are very capable when it comes to financials. If you're an executive or an individual looking to carve a path in fintech, I would really urge you to look at what the problem is that those institutions are looking to solve for, and see whether or not the skill set that you have aligns with that problem, because actually you may well surprise yourself in how closely that aligns from a skill set perspective.
Well, that's a great lead into my next question, which is what advice do you have for executives looking to make a switch from financial services to fintech? So, or from anywhere else into fintech. So why don't we begin with Alex on that?
Great question, because often so this is you're going into organizations that are redefining how they operate for the first time. There are relatively new and first-time roles. There will be an element of ambiguity, even in a large organization, in some cases, about what this role will be. So I think that the most important thing is to get real clarity. Make sure you speak to as many stakeholders in the process as possible, and to appreciate that the remit may well work. And if you're somebody who does not enjoy ambiguity, as often happens in a growth company, this may not be the right opportunity for you. Certainly if you go into a startup or a growth company environment, you've come from a very, very structured place. You will be pushed far out of your comfort zone. You will learn a lot about yourself in how you operate. And you have to make that personal decision whether the joy, the excitement of building something from scratch, and the good days when you achieve a huge amount, without having to go past endless committees and bureaucracy, outweighs the days when you're doing things that you did 10, 15 years prior in your career, because there isn't a HR department, there isn't the same quality of people in credit or risk or whichever department you used to rely on. And that is a very subtle balance to strike, and a conversation to have with yourself.
thank you for framing it in terms of sort of competencies, and also how you look at ambiguity, which is such an important issue, and your comfort with that. Dan, is there anything else you would add in terms of making a switch?
I think the thing for us is being thoughtful not only about the problem set, but also the institution that you're, the fintech that you're exploring, aligning that with your own goals and where, from a career path perspective, you're looking to grow. What we mean by that is spending time doing research into how the fintech has been, if it has been funded to date, if there's any views from the CEO and leadership team about what the path forward could be. It can be very different depending on whether or not it's clear that that institution is heading towards an IPO, or if that institution is actually setting itself up in a way that it's going to be ready for acquisition, and also just being mindful of that path to profitability. That's a huge point of discussion at the moment, and just being pragmatic around what kind of cash burn are these institutions going through, and therefore how much of your career and how much risk are you going to harbor by taking that move. And if you buy into the long-term vision and you buy into the CEO vision and the way it's funded and the direction of travel, then there's some of the ingredients that come together on a matrix and set you up nicely for success and align you with the core values and trajectory of the firm as well.
Okay, thank you. So Diane, over to you. What are some of the unique talent trends that you see? So we've just talked just a little bit about competencies. What more might you say about the different skills and competencies that you see as unique to fintech?
So, I mean, I think Karen, you just mentioned one in the last segment about ambiguity, right? So a lot of these organizations are nimble, fast growing. So somebody who's able to scale and be able to take it from, 100 people to 1,000 people and be fine and be, plugged in, accessible, and also, able to handle that pace. Is somebody who's able to kind of go with a fast growth environment, I think is going to be important. So ability to scale, I think, is key. Dealing with ambiguity, being agile, being flexible, because going from a larger institution to something that is smaller and or mission driven, you're going to be wearing a lot of different hats. And so being able to pivot in that way and be comfortable and have a low ego to almost no ego kind of situation, so you can be fine and not used to silos or castle building underneath you, and realizing it may just be you and you for a while, kind of figuring out what things need, what things need to be done, what you need to cover. I think the other piece as well is, and I think we talked a little bit about where this can come from. I think that software experience, the SaaS experience, being able to at least for the kind of people that I'm going after, that is an important attribute, and being able to understand what that means, how you sell it, how you market it. There's a lot of different aspects as compared to traditional banking that are going to be important. And I also think coming from a global and or multicultural, type of environment somewhere in your career, I think is very additive, because I don't see most of these, different fintech companies just focusing on just the US, and that's their only goal. The plan is to always kind of go broader, and in some cases, depending on what the mission structure is for the company, organization, they may want to serve certain underprivileged areas. A great example would be Chime, right? So I think those are all kind of key points. And the last thing I'll bring up is, I do think, again, depending on the type of position and the type of role that you're trying to go after, in some cases, it is important to have had that earlier banking, financial services, trading, regulatory, exposure somewhere in your career.
Okay, thank you for that, Diane. So Rick, anything you want to add in terms of skills and competencies that you see as unique? Got a lot covered here.
Yeah, I mentioned in my last comment that I think creativity and out-of-the-box thinking is a key element of being successful in the fintech world. I guess, to paint a picture, I think the people that have been most successful are not the people that are good soldiers and have always done exactly what they've been told to do. Instead of marching down the road and carrying their weapons, we're looking for the fighters that are hiding behind trees and rocks and have that sort of mental attitude in terms of being creative about doing things in a different way. Another big thing that we've seen, a big trend, I guess I would say we've seen, is that in these larger, more staid financial institutions, as they get more involved with fintech, there's a real chance and a pretty high probability of running into a cultural, generational conflict in terms of those smaller, more nimble fintech entities and the more structured, rigid, historical structure of the monolithic bank or financial institution. One of the things that's led to is a lot of leadership consulting work in terms of cultural adaptation. And the extension of that is in looking at candidates. I often interview to take a look at their emotional maturity and their ability to deal with that cultural, the cultural differences. So obviously that's a situation that is more specific to fintech entities within a larger financial institution, but also a trend and something to keep in mind is for the candidates that are listening out there. The other thing I would say is that one of the things we found interesting is that because there's so much startup activity in the fintech space, there's a potential that somebody's already done what our client is potentially looking to do in their specific geography. Somebody's probably may have already done that in another geography. And so there's one of the things that I don't know if you'd call this a skill or competency that we look for is the ability to find people that can do that and are interested in moving and relocating from one geography to another in terms of bringing an expertise and an experience base that sets them apart in one market versus being the next in the line of three in their current environment. So those are three thoughts that I think could be helpful in terms of thinking about what skills and competencies are needed.
So Rick, your comments made me think of a question that's actually going to be a lead in for my next question, but I'm going to start with you this time, just because of the question. It sounds like there may be a factor of ageism in how people look at candidate talent, and maybe it's important to get that balance of sort of wise management experience with sort of young upstart hiding behind the trees, being creative. So how do you see that balance in terms of maybe biases towards age or the realities of it?
I think it accentuates that potential problem which exists in any search, and I don't think it's a conscious bias. It's that unconscious element of thinking that hey, fintechs are based when people that are wearing shorts and t-shirts to work every day and not a sports coat and slacks or a dress or a business suit. And consequently, if I had the magic wand to wave over being able to reduce that bias, I'd probably be making a lot more money doing something else than being an executive recruiter today. So I don't think there's any magic answer to that. But, we do a lot in terms of diversity, in terms of the way we look for candidates and the way we present candidates. And I think that this is just an extension of that. But what it means underneath is, the old adage of, age is just a number. I think you have to be comfortable in your own skin that that's a truism, and that really what you need to look for and investigate when you're a recruiter is what's the emotional maturity of this individual, and are they going to be able to exist and be effective in either of those environments, or be the bridge to help bring that together, depending upon the role you're looking to fill. So I don't know if that's the perfect answer to your question, but those are my top of mind thoughts, and And I'm going to stop saying things so that you stop asking me follow-up questions, because you're really tough, Karen.
There we go. Well, that's my job. So I said it was a lead into my next question, which is really around diversity.